Today's show is sponsored by Yafa Bay and her Spirit of Tepereth Metaphysical Marketplace, here to provide you and your naturally special gifts with guidance and support through your life's journey, providing you tools such as candles, incense, charms, jewelry, oils, crystals, and much more. Visit them at 1273 West Broad Street in Columbus, Ohio, or online at spiritoftepereth.com. You can find all our sponsors' information in the show notes on our website. Now let's start the show.
The controversial group leading the charge, ADOS, or the American Descendants of Slavery. The controversial group ADOS, or the American Descendants of the controversial group ADOS, the American Descendants of the controversial group ADOS.
Welcome to the Articles of ADOS podcast, a weekly show where we bring you undiscussed news, articles, and information important to the American Descendants of Slavery, our friends, and our allies. You can find us every Friday, 10 a.m. on WCRS 92.7 and 98.3 here in Columbus, Ohio, or listen on your favorite podcast app. This is episode 23. I'm your host, Lisa Todd, along with my co-host,
Daud Giazan. On today's show, we will share articles from Vice News, ISC Media, WOSU Public Media, Forbes, and Minnesota Spokesman Recorder. Later in the show, stay tuned for our main event, where we dive into and present the article entitled In Defense of ADOS, a response to Jessica Aiwuyor.
Personality.
Peace.
This week in our personality piece, our personalities gotta be quick.
Why is that?
We got a lot of information to cover, and our personalities gotta take a back seat.
Okay, what do you suggest we do?
And that's it for this week's personality piece. Check back next week where we might have more time for personalities.
Yeah, we can't guarantee it though.
Exactly.
Catch the fire. If you're ADOS, an ally or friend, we encourage you to connect with a local ADOS chapter and help change your local politics. Our ADOS Ohio chapter in Columbus meets every fourth Sunday of the month. For more information on the time and location, visit adoscolumbus.org. You can also get more information on the ADOS movement, our politics, and the agenda. Please visit ados101.com.
ADOS Showcase, where we get to share ADOS-related talents, gifts, music, speeches, and spoken word. This week, we are featuring a song from Denami called Reparation for Slavery. Check it out.
Thumbs up. Fist up. Living in the world as a black man, they wanna see me ghost like Pac-Man. I backhand my way to stay. Think about Martin who paved the way. Think about X who held the K. Not afraid to say let the lead spray. I segue for our dearly departed Kamani Gray, Trayvon Martin, my pardon. This sound harshest. Blacks killed by correction officers. Stop and frisk laws to meet quotas set by the bosses higher up in government office, with the corporate sponsors laying out coffins. Education suppression is a deadly weapon we conceal from classrooms to the cell. Pipeline of iniquity is bigotry. Check the media, we portrayed as the enemy. Label terrorists for fighting freedom. Look out outside of Shakur, see fears would defeat them. Them being guards of the status quo, they being dreamers in the ghetto. Kids with their heads some slow, praying for hope on the front porch of the home. Do the math, take a look at the past. Look where we at. Systematic gap between whites and blacks, whites and Hispanics, whites and natives. One would swear that they hate us. In the city, poor communities are what they gave us. We only equal on Constitution papers. In the city, poor communities is what they gave us. Instead of a mule and a 40 acres. Instead of the mule and the 40 acres. Reparation.
And that was Denami. You can find him on social media everywhere, YouTube, and his website, denamionline.com. And remember, all artist information will be featured in our show notes on our website. If you too would like to submit your art, send a clean version to art@articlesofados.com.
In today's Rapid News reports, we have some articles that you may have missed, all in some way affect you and your ADOS life. Up first, we have
Call Trump's attack on the 1619 Project what they are: censorship of American history. From the publication Forbes, author and writer Seth Cohen. On Sunday morning, President Trump tweeted an attack on the 1619 Project, threatening to withhold funding from California schools teaching the popular journalism project focused on the rise and impact of slavery in the United States. With his newest tweet, the president's actions raise a troubling question. Why is the Trump administration threatening to censor the way schools teach about the history of slavery and racism in the United States? The president's assertion came in response to a tweet from an unverified account stating that California schools were teaching the 1619 Project curriculum. In response, Trump tweeted, "Department of Education is looking at this. If so, they will not be funded." I graded this article good. Trump's response is nothing more than predictable. ADOS is the foundation of American history, even before America was America. I know you hate to hear that, but you hate a lot of stuff, so get over it. Up next,
From the publication WND, entitled No Lockdown, Sweden Now Among World's Safest from Virus. Tagline, "We see no point in wearing a face mask, not even on public transport." Writer, WND staff. Meaning, enough people have developed immunity to significantly reduce or eliminate the spread of the coronavirus, reports StudyFinds.com. Scientists and doctors rely on the reproduction number, or R, to determine herd immunity. The number refers to how many people an infected person is likely to transmit the virus. Herd immunity is achieved when the number falls below 1. It's commonly believed that 60% of the population must have been infected to reach herd immunity. However, a recent study showed the number may actually be just 43%. In California, it appears that herd immunity was reached around July 15th, with slightly more than 10% of their population, 4.05 million, being infected, last said in a media release. This means that their basic reproduction number, R, under current restrictions is only 1.1. I graded this article good. I left out specifics about Sweden because I really want you to read it for yourself. It's a shame what we've ignored, what we've allowed people in power to ignore, as well as follow like sheep into a vaccine haze. And next,
lawsuit seeks reparation for city of Tulsa over 1921 massacre. From the publication The Hill, author and writer Kaylin Deese. A lawsuit filed this week in Tulsa, Oklahoma, is seeking reparations from the city and other government localities over one of the worst race massacres nearly a century ago. Plaintiffs in the case include 105-year-old Leslie Benningfield Randall, a survivor of the 1921 massacre, along with relatives of several other victims, according to documents filed in Tulsa County District Court. The complaint states that Randall suffers from emotional and physical distress that continues to this day, from the attacks led by white mobs that killed as many as 300 African Americans in the city. Mobs moved through Tulsa's Greenwood district, torching and looting buildings and wreaking damage on homes in an area commonly referred to as Black Wall Street. The court filing does not include specific damage amounts sought by plaintiffs, though it estimates that property damages for residents amount to between $50 million and $100 million in today's currency. I graded this article good. This is a monumental case. I hope that it is picked up and allowed to move forward. If so, it can lead to multiple cases for the economic terrorism bestowed on ADOS after slavery ended. We will keep our eyes on it. Up next,
from the publication Black Agenda Report, entitled Some Reflections on Systemic Racism and Capitalism. Tagline, "The system of exploitation that bore slavery remains, albeit without slavery, the very same system of exploitation." Writer Philippe Gendrot. When no one legitimately is intentionally carrying out racist policies, lobbying for racist laws and regulations, when the children of those historical victims of legalized racism have become judges, police chiefs, athletic and artistic icons, CEOs, millionaires, governors, senators, professors, president, when racism is ground for legal proceedings, how can this society remain fundamentally racist? But when these successes are compared to the overall conditions of black people across the nation, can these achievements and successes by some black individuals be taken as exceptions that, in fact, do confirm the racist status quo? With the success of the few confirms the idealistic notion that potentially any other individual can make it to success, while on the other hand posits that the success of the few reveals that the many, a material fact, cannot make it to success, and therefore that if a few blacks can achieve success in America, most cannot. For those who have succeeded, well, we can only say good for them, but then we have to ask, what about the rest of the people? The latest social and economic position remains determined by the system in which they live, a system systematically racist. I graded this article good. And next?
Kamala Harris, Two Systems of Justice for Black, White Americans. From the publication Newsday, author and writer Scott Idler. Democratic Vice Presidential nominee Kamala Harris said there were two systems of justice in the United States for white and black Americans, rebuking Attorney General William Barr and President Donald Trump for failing to more forcefully call out racial disparities in law enforcement. Harris, in remarks that aired Sunday on CNN, said, "I think that Donald Trump and Bill Barr are spending full time in a different reality. The reality of America today is what we have seen over generations and frankly since our inception, which is we do have two systems of justice in America." Harris was asked to respond to comments that Barr had made Wednesday on CNN. While Barr acknowledged that there are some situations where statistics would suggest that they, black Americans, are treated differently, he said, "But I don't think that's necessarily racism." I graded this article okay. I also think it's tone deaf on Kamala Harris to assert herself into this discussion, as she was a participant in the two systems of justice. And believe me, she knows how to not answer questions. And up next,
from the publication ISC Media, entitled Exclusive Interview with Indoctrination's Dr. David Martin. Writer Ben Swan. Is there a very clear and provable paper trail that proves that the U.S. government did in fact work to help manipulate and create this latest coronavirus, and that this virus is actually the product not of nature, but of man-made manipulation? The answer to that question is yes. Many of the things that have been postulated to be novel about the coronavirus that we're currently talking about are things that were very clearly documented in experimentation in vitro in labs, going back as far as 2013 in patent applications. Now, I've been reporting about this for 2 months. A clear paper trail that connects U.S. labs, DARPA, and the creation of a manipulated coronavirus over the past couple of decades that has ultimately led us to where we are today. The fact checkers will tell you all of this is conspiracy theories, but here's the problem. It's not based on theory at all. It's based on factual sourced documentation. I graded this report excellent. And next?
I'm a black doctor. I wear my scrubs everywhere now. Tagline, it's about protecting myself. From the publication The Washington Post, author and writer Arturo E. Holmes II. Arturo E. Holmes II is an Atlanta native and a urology resident at SUNY Downstate Health Sciences University in Brooklyn, New York. He states, "As a urology resident, I spend up to 70 hours a week at the hospital. I wear scrubs to the operating room and through long hospital shifts. And of course, I wear a gown and other personal protective equipment over my scrubs when caring for patients with COVID-19 in Brooklyn. Even when I'm not there though, I wear my medical scrubs everywhere. I wear scrubs and a mask when I'm shopping at the grocery store, rollerblading home from work, and even meeting up with friends, always seeking to preemptively exonerate my blackness with my professional garb. It's about protecting myself. Like many black Americans, I've been followed by security personnel through department stores without cause and pulled over by police officers at night for no reason. When I'm in my scrubs, all of that happens less often." I graded this article excellent, and I can absolutely see him getting passes because he is seen as a good black when he has his uniform on. Unfortunately, it's not going to always work. Black men, regardless of profession, their clothing, or fancy cars, are seen as threats. It's ingrained in America's psyche and perpetuated on a 24-hour news cycle. There is no escape from blackness. It follows you everywhere. And up next,
From the publication WOSU Public Media, entitled Racism Within Columbus Police, Black Officers Call for Internal Reforms, written by Paige Flager. For 23 years, Eric Cornett worked his dream job, a police officer serving his hometown of Columbus, alongside his partner Carl Shaw. Residents in the community trusted Cornett and Shaw. They were some of the only black police officers on the force. But Cornett says his dream devolved into a nightmare in 2014 when he found out Columbus Police Sergeant was threatening him and other black officers. He referred to me as an ape, monkey, N-word. He mentioned taking myself and my supervisor out back and shooting us in the head, Cornett says. Nothing came of the internal investigation. The sergeant, Eric Moore, was fired in 2016 for an unrelated offense, but an arbitrator reinstated him at the urging of the Fraternal Order of Police. He remains a sergeant with the department. They had to go through the dog and pony show of making it look like they were going for an outside source, which that would have been their best bet. To bring someone in from the outside, one officer says. Quinlan has been with the department for 30 years, and he is part of the problem. Black officers allege discrimination extends beyond official duties. Some sought-after special duty positions are also dominated by white officers, such as staffing events or concerts at places like Nationwide Arena. A review of Columbus police documents show only 2 black officers are approved to work Nationwide Arena, compared to 26 white officers. I graded this report good. And next,
Mike Bloomberg wants to solve America's black doctor shortage. Tagline, if you're black, having a doctor who looks like you could save your life. Publication, ABC News. Author and writer Aaron Shoemaker. Michael Bloomberg isn't shy about leveraging his fortune in an attempt to solve intractable problems like obesity and gun violence. On September 3rd, the billionaire added another public health project to his fix-it list, America's black doctor shortage. Bloomberg announced Thursday that he would give $100 million to the nation's 4 historically black medical schools: Meharry Medical College, Howard University College of Medicine, Morehouse School of Medicine, and Charles R. Drew University of Medicine and Science. The gift, which will be awarded to medical students in grants up to $100,000, will provide scholarships for 800 students. Nearly every medical student currently enrolled in receiving financial aid over the next 4 years will get a scholarship, according to Bloomberg Philanthropies. The donation is the first major commitment from the Greenwood Initiative, which Bloomberg launched during his presidential campaign, and which is designed to invest in black communities and increase generational wealth among black families. I graded this article good. Although Bloomberg is doing good and charitable work which will impact few, it's not a government sweeping program that can repair the nation. I do hope it really helps black ADOS medical students in their pursuit of happiness. Studies show we need them more than ever. And up next,
from the publication ISC Media, entitled Exclusive, COVID vaccine patent warned of deliberate coronavirus release 9 months before COVID-19. Writer Ben Swan. Newly unearthed documents from Moderna Pharmaceuticals' COVID patent application include a claim of concern about a deliberate release of SARS coronavirus 9 months before the official emergence of COVID-19. In addition, it turns out that Moderna may not have the legal right to even release its vaccine in the next few weeks because the company appears to be infringing on an existing patent for the core technology. Is this why Moderna's executives are selling their stock? This episode includes my latest interview with Dr. David Martin, where we discuss what appears to be blatant corruption from Moderna, the biotechnology company which is poised to be far ahead of its competitors in creating a vaccine for COVID-19. Dr. Martin explains the company's unethical process to obtain coronavirus vaccine patents, the cover-up surrounding Moderna and its patents, and how their actions could directly affect other companies seeking to produce a coronavirus vaccine. This interview highlights vital information that you aren't going to find by casually scrolling social media or your news feed, and we are excited to be sharing this information on ISC Media. I graded this excellent. And next,
We Can't Breathe. Stop the pollution in black communities. From the publication Minnesota Spokesman Recorder, author and writer Mike Griffin. Black Americans have disproportionately higher rates of death related to COVID-19, higher rates of underlying health conditions, and higher respiratory traumas. Literally, black people can't breathe. So the question is why? Why are Black Americans and other people of color suffering from higher rates of respiratory illnesses? Although there isn't a single cause, here are 3 facts we know. Fact 1. People of color and low-income people are vastly more likely to live in close proximity to industrial-scale incinerators, which are facilities that burn waste and release toxic emissions and byproducts into the air. A recent study found that 80% of incinerators in the United States are located in low-income and/or communities of color. Fact 2. Those who live closest to incinerators have higher rates of respiratory and other health issues. Fact 3. Those with underlying respiratory and health conditions are impacted by incinerators at greater rates than those without. I graded this article good. And I also want to point out that our very own Daud Giazan called this before anybody as one of the main reasons why we were dying at a higher rate here on Articles of ADOS podcast. And up next,
from the publication New York Daily News, entitled White Supremacy is Most Persistent and Lethal Terror Threat in the U.S., according to Homeland Security Draft Report. Writer Jessica Aiwuyor. A draft report from the Department of Homeland Security has predicted white supremacy will be the most persistent and lethal terror threat in the United States next year. In 3 different draft documents obtained by Lawfare Editor-in-Chief Benjamin Weitz and first reported on by Politico, the DHS expressed greater worry about the controversial ideology than both foreign terrorist groups and disinformation efforts from Russia. Both of the corresponding sections in the next 2 drafts label the nation's most persistent and lethal threat as domestic violent extremists, rather than specifically naming white supremacists. In a later section called The Terrorist Threat to the Homeland, all 3 reports delve into further detail on white supremacy. I graded this report fair. Good that this and other publications are identifying the most critical domestic threat to this nation that is antithetical to what former FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover claimed Black unity and a Black Messiah to be. Poor, and that this and other reports failed to connect that in 2009, Homeland Security officials attempted to announce the same conclusions and were rebuffed by the congressional right hand of white domination and its white racist media, putting to rest the big white lie of Black identity extremists. No, I ain't forgot. Which they still try to resurrect by their attempts to label the 93% violence-free protest movements for Black lives as violent looting rioters. They ought to be ashamed. Well, you know they're not. And that's it for this week's Rabbit News. All articles featured will be posted in our Facebook group and in the show notes on our website. Are you busy? Is the news coming so fast you can barely keep up? No worries. The Articles of ADOS podcast is here to help. Hit the subscribe button wherever you're listening right now, and we'll make sure you stay up to date on the news and information that affects you and your ADOS life.
Time now for the main event.
In this week's main event, we will present to you the article entitled In Defense of ADOS, a Response to Jessica Aiwuyor. Publication, The Moguldom Nation and AfroBookworm.com. Writer, Afro Bookworm. We are proud to present this in its entirety and in the author's own words. As we enter the start of a new decade, one thing becomes abundantly clear if you have even half a toe dipped into our socio-political zeitgeist. The ADOS movement has caused a fundamental shift in Black political discourse, and it will be sustained. Therefore, I'd like to start out this post with a gentle note of reassurance to ADOS folks and non-ADOS individuals like myself who have decided to align ourselves with this movement. Buckle up, because there are turbulent times ahead. But remember that you are prepared for this. You have hours of invested time and effort into a careful, precise political education. You are beginning to form dedicated local collectives with increasingly sophisticated efforts of political activism. You are only a few months removed from the wonderful fellowship of the inaugural conference, and you are only a tweet away from supportive online community. Should you need a pep talk, you got this. Now, to the business. I felt compelled to respond to this piece because I have conversations with individuals like Miss Aiwuyor very frequently in real life. You see, I have quite a bit in common with Miss Aiwuyor. I, too, am a black woman who identifies as a womanist, black feminist, depending on the context. I have a pro-black Pan-African vision at my core, in that I am invested in black people on every single corner of the globe, achieving liberation in their distinct justice projects. So I'll often have these moments with individuals who share some of these same identity markers where we're finding common ground on a lot of things until it comes to the ADOS movement. Frankly, I see the attempted academic formality of Miss Aiwuyor's piece as indicative of the fact that those in establishment spaces and those who don't realize just how establishment they are when it comes to this particular justice project are now recognizing that ADOS as a political force that is here to stay. Unresearched Russian bot accusations on cable news shows with credibility problems of their own aren't going to cut it. They don't find a slanderous tweet that starts with the annoyingly disingenuous RIP in advance to my mentions. Disclaimer sufficient anymore. They need a 26-page PDF report now. It's been in the works, and here we are. So let's address each of the 13 points that were brought up. Please forgive me if this comes across as scattered, but I wanted to address them in the same order that they were framed in the piece.
ADOS has no affiliation with PFER or any other groups with similar goals. Yvette Carnell has also been clear and forthright about her own non-paid involvement with the organization in the past, noting that immigration's impact on a Black American community that has never been afforded the full benefit of citizenship is not something that can be ignored or cast aside for fear of claims of xenophobia. This isn't the proverbial smoking gun that you all think it is, so please just move on. Additionally, this accusation ignores the fact that co-founder Antonio Moore wrote for the decidedly left-leaning Institute for Policy Studies for over a year. The articles and videos that he created in partnership with inequality.org from the economic underpinning that grounds ADOS as a data-driven movement speaking to the reality of Black wealth. I have to beg the question, why do so many detractors want to ignore the work of Antonio Moore, a Black male attorney with left-leaning platforms? Simple. It shatters these notions of right-wing associations to pieces.
Number 2, there is no official charge from the brain trust of Yvette Carnell, Antonio Moore, or Dr. Darity to utilize ADOS on the 2020 census. There were 2 specific charges made at the conference which anyone could have streamed, so I'll share them. A. Project Down Ballot, which was a charge to ensure that ADOS eschew voting for Democratic presidential candidates who failed to respond to pressure placed on them by ADOS, but remain engaged and intentional about voting for down ballot races that have a local impact. B. Project Takeover, which was a charge for attendees to re-engage in local civic organizations who could use some of the laser-focused energy provided by those in the ADOS movement. So if Mr. Moore or Ms. Carnell intend for this census action to be a critical feature of the 2020 national agenda, why wasn't that one of the charges? Have they made any videos alluding to this as one of their directives? No. So to pretend as though what you might be seeing as tweets from a few accounts here and there is one of the core directives of the movement for 2020 is disingenuous. Au contraire, as part of the Project Takeover, some conference attendees like myself are involved in census outreach programs through the Urban League and NAACP as they mobilize their efforts in the Black community. I'm very proud to have assisted in coordinating a census outreach branch through my local Young Professional Urban League affiliate.
Number 3, HR 40. First of all, the H.R. 40 hearing happened this summer in large part because of the unprecedented effort made to pressure legislators' ADOS. And that is not ground I will cede. Currently, ADOS chapters are making an effort to push for a markup session of H.R. 40 using much-needed edits suggested by Dr. Darity. So I don't see where this accusation has merit. Further, making the necessary distinction of ADOS rather than the unspecific term African American speaks to the core principle of the ADOS project. So why characterize that as a frivolous change? The goalpost has to be squarely on ADOS in order for reparations to be moral mea culpa for the United States that it needs to be. Reparations for the system of chattel slavery here in the United States are specifically owed to ADOS and ADOS alone.
Number 4, lineage documentation. First, it's a very odd move to link the term slavery papers with some sort of sinister intent or maybe shame, as though physical documentation of one's ancestors' pain is not something that one wouldn't want to seek out. Indeed, some of my best memories as a kid who grew up on PBS were of watching Dr. Henry Louis Gates present Mae Jemison, Oprah, and others with physical records of their ancestors. My sisters and I, sometimes making more noise than our grandmama liked as she watched her favorite show, would always fall silent in reverence, feeling the deep emotions through the TV screen, even as young kids. But I digress. The current conditions outlined by ADOS ask for proof of only one ancestor who was enslaved in the United States. Ms. Aiwuyor overstates the difficulty of obtaining such documentation, and perhaps misunderstands that there are meticulous records kept by enslaved people. Indeed, I have long admired the work of genealogist Antoinette Horrell and others who have made this their life's work. One ADOS chapter has even hosted an event equipping attendees with the tools to do so. This doesn't feel like a fair point, and again, the use of the slavery papers term has an underlying tone of derision that left me unsettled and confused. Also, let's be clear. The accrued disadvantage and stigma of being a descendant of enslaved people here in the United States is already here and part of the lived experiences of individual ADOS people, baked into the very fabric of this nation. To pretend that a widespread unearthing of the artifacts of this history would somehow add a stigma shows an ignorance of the fact that the stigma is already there.
Number 5, in Cobra. I'll start with some personal anecdotes. I've attended 2 Cobra events here in Chicago recently. At the first one, a member of the panel referred to ADOS as a cult and never apologized for that. At the second one of the presenters mockingly pretended to be entirely unaware of the movement at all, but quickly admitted when I approached him afterwards that he was actually quite familiar with members of the ADOS chapter in his hometown. On both occasions, this kind of mockery was unprovoked, and I think it's fair to say that this mirrors some of what we see on a national scale. The core of ADOS political ideology is a grounding in Americanness, and it is clear that many Cobra members see this as a threat to their own approach. Ms. Aiwuyor seems to perceive this necessary distinction as a personal attack. But why would you expect 2 groups with opposing goals to work together? ADOS seeks justice specifically for Black Americans, while Cobra continues to have a global orientation to the reparations project. ADOS leaders and various individuals defending themselves against often unprovoked slander is being mischaracterized here.
Number 6, defending one's stance against frequent mischaracterizations is often necessary. Far too often, I see some public figure offer some unasked for declaration full of misrepresentations and dishonest readings of the ADOS movement, and then throw up the RIP my mentions stick at the end of their long, meandering, and scattered threads. Then they act as though they are being attacked when ADOS folks and allies like myself come in and give them the attention they are begging for by posting the vitriol in the first place by correcting and defending our ideas. Frankly, this PDF came across as the more sophisticated version of the very same playbook, a more academic form of RIP my mentions, if you will. So is my blog post that addresses some of this dangerous misinformation about a movement that I've decided to be supportive of going to be deemed a swarm?
Number 7, immigration. ADOS leaders' focus on immigration policy is not born out of a desire to keep America white. But I think this is a disingenuous charge anyways, as a reparations claim strikes a death blow to white supremacy as it has manifested through U.S. chattel slavery and all ensuing mechanisms to keep ADOS in the bottom caste. Rather, ADOS folks and allies like myself see the way that the left has embraced a new justice project of securing the benefits of citizenship for undocumented individuals without finishing the business of redress, repair, and reparations for ADOS as deeply hypocritical moral failure. As an educator, I've started to form this analogy in my head of it being akin to a student ignoring a 12-page research paper in favor of starting a new assignment. You never finished that research paper, America, and lobbying accusations of xenophobia as cover doesn't erase the homework that you need to do. Do your homework.
Number 8. ADOS leaders see an anchoring in Americanness as a necessary part of starting lineage therapy, an assertion that one's identity as ADOS is whole and complete. No more of the lost tribe rhetoric that has long been one of the more psychologically damaging aspects of Pan-African ideology. And those of us who still consider ourselves to be Pan-African need to acknowledge that this kind of romanticized distortion can indeed be detrimental to the psyche. Framing this strengthening of one's distinct lineage as a nefarious attempt of separation from the continent is a mischaracterization. As the child of Jamaican immigrants, nobody would ever chastise my decision to anchor myself in learning about the history of my ancestors in Jamaica, or wrapping myself in the Jamaican flag. Nobody would tell me that I needed to instead spend more energy seeking out my West African roots, though I've chosen to do that already. So why can't the detractors afford ADOS identity the same respect?
Number 9. Pan-Africanism and genetics. Does Pan-Africanism as a serious political movement have momentum in the U.S.? Does it address the material concerns of ADOS people in a specific way? No. To the other point, Ms. Carnell frequently repeats that we come from slaves and slave owners, and that is a fact. That is a part of the lineage of ADOS people, and pointing that out isn't villainous or even unprecedented. As far as cultural grounding goes, Baldwin always pointed out the fundamental Americanness of the American Negro, particularly in his writings from Paris. But people only seem to deem this problematic when it comes from ADOS asserting the same thing in our present moment.
Number 10. Stay on Code and Immigration Part 2. First, the reference to stay on code is a phrase should be attributed to a different group of people led by a leader who now disavows any association with ADOS. So let's not link that rhetoric to this movement. Moving on. Please be clear about what ADOS is doing in discussions of black immigrants. They are problematizing a long-held narrative of black immigrant rags to riches stories that are frequently used to berate ADOS communities for government-enacted socioeconomic collapse. They are pointing out that a good number of black immigrants who come to the U.S. are educated and solidly middle class, with at least enough wealth and access to resources to get here. And so any comparisons to the fortunes of a bottom caste group are unfounded. I could make this abundantly clear with a simple comparison of my grandfather with my husband's. My husband's grandfather moved from the rural South to Chicago and was only 2 generations removed from slavery. His lifelong occupation was that of a janitor, and my husband, educated and accomplished, is very proud of the life his grandfather built despite all of the odds. My grandfather was an architect and landowner with some measure of political clout in Kingston, Jamaica. This contrast isn't uncommon, according to the data, and it isn't a provocation for ADOS to point these facts out as a way to problematize conceptions of flat blackness.
Number 11. Why can't y'all let the bot narrative go? There's been scarce evidence of bots or trolls found to be using the ADOS hashtag. Produce an IT forensic data report prepared by a respected digital sleuth to substantiate your claim or stop making it. You don't get to dismiss people as paid trolls just because you don't agree with the agenda or the goals of the movement.
Number 12, Dr. King and Mother Moore. I want to address specifically the screenshot of the tweets by Dr. Darity that were posted. I see his response as a way to take the steam out of these disingenuous exchanges. Do the Pan-African leanings of these leaders somehow diminish the fact that they were clear about the specificity of the ADOS justice claim as it regards reparations? What is the point being made here? That some of us, myself, can hold two truths at once, having a sense of global Black solidarity and even an affinity for reclaiming African heritage, with the clear knowledge that there is the need for a distinct ADOS justice claim? Again, this isn't the smoking gun that you think it is. It's also laughable to say that Dr. King is being taken out of context when Yvette Carnell very recently led a book club utilizing Dr. King's work. Interesting that you think a group of people who've immersed themselves in this work are cherry picking.
Number 13, put some respect on the ADOS movement. I don't have much to say about the last point because you're absolutely right that the ADOS movement has engendered a willingness to bring reparations into the national discourse, and credit should be given where it is due. This point in particular had a ring of who do these Negroes think they are? I find that to be disrespectful, especially for someone who alludes in some places to the Black Lives Matter movement and who likely react, and rightfully so, to attempts to diminish how that movement changed public discourse in horror.
I have one final charge for others in the Black empowerment space whose fingers are also itching to write a treatise on ADOS. I challenge you to research and write a passionate, solemn tone about a problem facing Black Americans in your hometown instead. As Yvette and Tone frequently point out, you will likely find ADOS situated at the bottom of every social economic indicator in your area, should you take some time to dig into the data. Write some legislation to tackle an ADOS-specific problem that corresponds to your area of expertise and get a legislator to sponsor it in your state legislature. Find a local ADOS chapter and partner with the energies of the people in the chapter to craft a Black agenda specific to your town, city, or state. Redirect your energy away from detracting from ADOS and pivot to the problem that should be at the forefront of your mind. The prospect that the median wealth of Black Americans could reach zero by 2053. I plan to take my own advice and use this blog on a more regular basis to illuminate policy decisions that adversely impact ADOS in my hometown and engage with my elected officials to chart a new path forward. Best regards, Afro Bookworm. Well, that completes this presentation. Listeners, you can get the link to this full article on our website in this week's show notes. Coming up, we have the commentary on this article. Did we like it? Did we hate it? Stay tuned.
We want to take the time to give our friends and listeners a shout out. Thank you for clicking that subscribe button and for liking and sharing the podcast. You can also continue supporting the show by joining our Patreon, where you can receive exclusive content and promotional items for as little as $3 a month. Sponsoring the show will ensure that we can continue to bring you the news and information important to your ADOS life. So head on over and join us at patreon.com/articles of ADOS. So what do you think of this article?
Loved it.
I think it's excellent and it speaks for itself, which is why we presented it in its entirety. Shout out to Afro Bookworm. I love her work. She responded to Aiwuyor's first attempt at discrediting the ADOS movement back in 2019. She was on her soapbox then and still is, I see. Afro Bookworm then and now responded in a way that is very data-driven, matter of fact, and once again having to defend the same lies and misinformation that Miss Aiwuyor is presenting. I don't know if we pose a threat to whatever programs or initiatives that she got going on, but her attacks are unwarranted. She makes these vitriol articles and webinars and tweets and blocks people that responds with facts, direct facts to her claims, And I can only see this as an opportunity for her to use a very controversial group and a very controversial subject to gain funding in some way, or at least signal to the powers of DNC or the powers to other political parties that she is available to be their attack dog. One thing that Afro Bookworm didn't address, Miss Aiwuyor in her webinar brought up the fact that she feels the ADOS movement is voter suppressionist. What does that have to do with Pan-Africanism? What does voting have to do with coming together with other Black people in the diaspora?
Very little to if anything.
Lastly, I think that ADOS has been on the defense since the beginning. You know, we've had to basically defend ourselves on social media, on where we stand and why we are defining ourselves and why we are fighting reparations specifically for ADOS. But it's now time to begin to think about offense. It's now time to forge our own offense and get the ADOS movement and how do I want to say it? It's now time for us to forge an offense and to build positive media coverage. It's now time for us to put our own selves in the forefront of these articles. So if you're a writer like Afro Bookworm, please write more articles on ADOS movement. If you're a podcast like us, don't give up. Keep releasing podcasts. It doesn't matter if 2 people listen to it. Never give up. We need the narrative. We need to set our own narrative and not rely and wait and react on people like Miss Aiwuyor.
I wish to provide a rebuttal not toward Miss Aiwuyor, but to her handlers. And those belong to the Black baby boomers, including the CBC and their puppeteers, the Democratic Party. Out of her 13, Miss Afro Bookworm's 13, I just have 7. I'll be quick. ADOS has no affiliation with PFIR or any other groups with similar goals. On that note, I denote 2 areas: organizations and white nationalism. 1, military and corporations. Black ADOS people, from adult men, women, and even children, have all served not for the freedoms we didn't have, but for the freedoms we deserved, while knowing that ultimately we were and have been serving white elite nationalist interests, whether it be in the military, police, the corporation, and or their subsidiaries. B, let's go to the quote. She was elaborate on tandem quotes. Here's some quotes. I will say, in addition to this, that there is a physical difference between the white and black races, which I believe will forever forbid the 2 races living together in terms of social and political equality. Next quote. And inasmuch as they cannot so live, while they do remain together, there must be the position of superior and inferior. And I, as much as any other man, am in favor of having the superior position assigned to the white race. This was quotes from Abraham Lincoln, considered the great emancipator, even though he emancipated us in areas and territories he did not control. I'll continue. Next set of quotes. I'll have those N-words voting Democratic for the next 200 years. Next quote. But I've got to prove it, that discrimination is taking place, and I can't prove it in Texas because there are more N-words there voting than white folks. Those 2 quotes came from Lyndon Baines Johnson. Again, I hope you can perceive the irony here. You can use anybody's quotes to do anything. Next point, HR 40. I am appalled at what I have learned from Dr. Darity's edits to HR 40. It is abundantly clear that the originator, John Conyers, as well as his co-conspirators emanating from the NCOBRA and NARC organizations, were never truly interested in achieving reparations for our people. They were merely seeking an avenue in which to suck off the teat of white elites through the Democratic Party, acting as willing automatons claiming to be our people to our people that they were fighting for all blacks in America and of the diaspora, a lofty goal projected in order to garner our hopes and dreams while lining their pockets through paid positions. For 30 years, the Democrats were simply unwilling to pay cash for that form of extortion. They treated those Negroes so disrespectfully that for 30 years, they were only willing to grant them access to luncheons and handshakes photo ops as payoffs. In Cobra and Narc, we are not witnessing a group of elders being disrespected by younger upstarts. In truth, we are witnessing spoiled baby boomers seeking attention. They feel that they are owed, now losing grasp of butter biscuits and that bag. Immigration. From the largest research study done on American racism and race relations called An American Dilemma, The Negro Problem in Modern Democracy by Gunnar Myrdal, published in 1942. He blatantly illustrated in that work how white elites, North and South, since the Civil War, had always used Mexican immigrants to undermine American unionization, labor struggles for better wages, as well as blacks' foothold into a variety of industries. Not to see how this drives lower caste whites and blacks into a common interest, such as in the progressive movements of the latter end of the 19th century, look it up, is political immaturity at best or absolute stupidity at worst. Pan-Africanism, tribalism, corruption, neocolonialism, whether it come from the Anglo-American powers or from China, Pan-Africanism will never be realized, let alone maintained, in this climate and reality. Our brothers and sisters on the continent have their work to do, as we of the diaspora have our work to do. For among the diaspora, as well as a few countries on the continent, are hearing our call by making moves towards repairing what those powers have and continue to break, by making their demands for reparations. This is the work we must do and is currently the priority we build towards that Pan-African future. Why can't you all let the bot narrative go? Part. Dr. Cornel West and Tavis Smiley deserve an apology from the Black collective as they championed our people against the benign neglect of the Obama administration, which they were cajoled and castigated and even had their lives threatened for. As well as the ADOS movement deserves an apology for the complicity of too many of our people who engaged in serving the needs and interests of white elites within the Democratic Party by trying to undermine, cajole, and castigate our divine mission. Shame on you. From Dr. King and Queen Mother Moore, I will just cite the article from the Huffington Post. It should be no surprise, therefore, that these demands for economic justice were taken up by the wife of Dr. Martin Luther King, who in 1991 joined with 8 CEOs of America's leading African American organizations to oppose Republican Senator Orrin Hatch's bill to do away with sanctions against employers who persisted in hiring illegal aliens as a means of discriminating and reducing the wages of against African Americans. We are concerned, Senator Hatch, Coretta Scott King wrote in her now largely forgotten letter, that your proposed remedy will cause another problem, the revival of discrimination against black and brown U.S. documented workers in favor of cheap labor. This was written by Robert Hardaway, contributor, professor of law at the University of Denver's Strums. This was written by Robert Hardaway, contributor, professor of law at University of Denver's Storm College of Law, 2017. I'm done. They should be ashamed. They should be ashamed. And I don't blame Miss Aiwuyor. She's young. She doesn't know no better. But these older folks who used her, they know better, and they should be held accountable. And I just mean we just should turn our backs to them and don't pay them any attention. They're embarrassing.
We want to again send a thank you to Afro Bookworms. Number one, advocacy for the ADOS movement and also her allyship. It's not many allies that we can point to and say they get it, but she gets it, and anyone that feels the same as she does, they get it as well. They know our intentions. They know what we are doing. They know that people like Miss Aiwuyor are distracting and disruptive to what we are trying to do, and that is get reparations. So, Miss Aiwuyor, yes, you are anti-reparations. Miss Aiwuyor, yes, you are anti-ADOS. Yes, Miss Aiwuyor, you are being used to perpetrate false lie on the people that built this country and are seeking redress from our government. Explain that part. Do a webinar on why you're against reparations the way that ADOS wants it. Do a webinar on why Pan-Africanism and voter suppression should be in the same sentence. Is that it?
That's it.
Listeners, that's it for the commentary for today's main event. Check back next week for a great new article we know you'll love. As always, you can find the link to these full articles that we present. Voices of ADOS. In this week's segment, we highlight an ADOS voice who is a strong advocate for ADOS and the data. Shannon Mcfall gives us daily information on Facebook and is now taking his information to YouTube. Trust me, you will want to subscribe to the Black Watch channel. You won't be disappointed. Information to his YouTube channel, you guessed it, will be in our show note. The Articles of ADOS is proud to present a snippet of what you'll have in store if you follow this great voice.
The Black Watch YouTube channel 100% unapologetically promotes the Black collective. The Black Watch's main ideology lives within the 6 principles for redress of American Descendants of Slavery, ADOS. And although we may not always agree with everyone who's fighting for the same justice claim that we are, we will never defame or degrade any of our brothers or sisters out here in the struggle for restorative justice. On the flip side of that, don't get it twisted. We rookies on the YouTube streets, but we're not going to be your whipping boys out here. We will hit back. This ain't the 60s, and this ain't the Pettus Bridge. The Black Watch's goal is not to be famous on YouTube or any other social media platform. We're just using this modern day soapbox, ladder, and virtual street corner just like everybody else. The Black Watch's goal is to bring awareness, enlightenment, and strength to the Black collective. And as a bottom caste faction of people, we can no longer waste our time waiting for systemic powers to do right by us. The time for us has come to align and govern ourselves judiciously and continue to do so, or we would be lost carnage out here on the soil that our ancestors built for free. With that being said, we know that everybody Black ain't coming with us. They say you never judge a book by its cover. But that's like saying you never judge a keeper by his brother. What's seen on the exterior is not the same as what's on the interior, like overtly racist rhetoric coming from the inferior. Calling oneself the master race when you've mastered nothing, that's like calling Cash Money the greatest record label of all time because they mastered stunting. It's easy being me because I ain't trying to be no one else. I'm going to go for collective uplift before I go for self. I'm only self-righteous when it comes to our wealth. We've been left to dream how to live like Americans. We focus on white supremacy. Y'all focus on Farrakhan. First of all, it's Farrakhan, you morons. Since you want to talk that shit, let's talk reparations. Yeah, y'all gonna think I'm a trip, but I'm really a destination. Indefinitely traveling, but no vacation. If you don't like my channel, then turn the station. Black folks brutalized over 400 years. Now we've lost our patience. If it's a new time, a new day, it's time for a new normal. No more casual politicking. The dress code is formal. A formal redress for descendants of slavery. The redress is for services rendered. Don't act fucking crazy. Y'all know what y'all have done. Now it's time for atonement. We waited 400 plus years. Now you wait a motherfucking moment. We waited on tables while everybody else was eating. We cropped all the land, and then came the shared cheating. We asked for the right to vote, and then came the beatings. We asked to buy houses, and then came predatory lending. We asked to be integrated, and y'all created irresponsible spending because you bulldozed Black America to build your highways. And then you wonder why old Black folks look at you sideways because they know what y'all did. They're just too broken to speak of the past. But this is 2020, Chief. Try to run that shit again, and we gonna get in that act. The Black Watch YouTube channel. Subscribe to it. Like it. Live it. Love it. Or not. One love.
We're coming to get our check.
There you have it, another week, another show. Thanks for joining us on the Articles of ADOS podcast. Make sure to visit our website, articlesofados.com, where you can join our mailing list and see the show notes for today's episode.
Be sure to tune in next Friday for a new episode of Undiscussed News you may have missed. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback, send us an email to listeners@articlesofados.com.
And remember, you can catch us live at 10 a.m. every Friday on WCRS 92.7 and 98.3 here in Columbus, Ohio. Also head over to our Patreon page to support the podcast as we give you weekly news and information important to our community. Until next time, family, stay safe and stay strong. Peace.
We're coming to get our check.